Have you ever wondered why you can watch hours of self-improvement videos, read books on discipline, save motivational quotes, and still wake up the next day as the exact same person? Have you noticed how the people who change their lives the most never talk about motivation? They don't chase inspiration. They don't sit around waiting to feel ready. They simply act every single day, quietly, relentlessly, without fanfare, without applause, while some people are scrolling through 10 habits that will change your life. They have already finished doing the habit. While some people are watching how to start, they have already started. So what separates these two groups? It's not intelligence, it's not knowledge, it's not motivation. The truth is uncomfortable. Most people today are drowning in information, but starving in action. And if you're honest with yourself, you might recognize this pattern too. You don't have a discipline problem. You have a knowledge without soul problem. You know exactly what to do. You've known for years. You've heard all the advice, consumed all the wisdom, memorized all the steps. But something inside you refuses to move. There is a word for this condition, not a modern psychological term, not a self-help phrase, a concept from ancient Japan, a concept older than motivation itself, that describes the one thing you're missing. Not more information, a soul, a spirit, a force inside you that makes you act, even when every part of you wants to stop. The Japanese called it Yamato Damashi, the spirit that animates knowledge, and without it, no amount of books, techniques, courses, or strategies will ever change your life. Because knowledge without soul is dead. It sits in your mind like a library with no reader. Beautiful, impressive, completely useless. Today, we're going to revive that soul, because the moment your knowledge gains a spirit, your life will not just improve, it will transform. To understand Yamato Damashi, we need to travel back over 1,000 years to 10th century Japan during the Heian period. This was a time of poetry, philosophy, literature, art, and an almost obsessive fascination with Chinese culture. The elite studied Confucius, Buddhist sutras, Sun Tzu's strategies, ancient war manuals, meditation scrolls. They memorized thousands of pages of wisdom from across Asia. They were intelligent, they were cultured, they were brilliant, and yet many of them had a strange weakness. They knew everything, but did nothing. They could talk about courage, but had never shown courage. They could debate war, but could not lift a sword. They could recite strategies, but froze in real situations. They possessed karasukai, foreign knowledge, but lacked Yamato Damashi, the native spirit, the soul of action. Imagine a person today who has watched hundreds of videos on fitness, yet never steps into a gym. Someone who studies business, but never starts anything. A person who understands psychology, but still repeats the same self-destructive patterns. This was the Heian elite. They weren't stupid. They weren't lazy. They simply lacked the one ingredient that transforms knowledge into reality. A soul that makes the body move. A spirit that does not negotiate with comfort. A duty stronger than emotion. And so, the Japanese developed a concept to explain this missing force. A force that keeps you moving when motivation dies, keeps you consistent when feelings change, keeps you aligned with who you declared yourself to be, and turns your knowledge from theory into lived experience. That force was Yamato Damashi. Not nationalism, not blind loyalty, not war propaganda, not the twisted version used centuries later, but the original essence, the inner fire that unites knowledge with action, the soul that forces your body to obey your purpose, the spirit that makes you unstoppable. This is the missing link in your life. Not another technique, not another book, not another YouTube tutorial. A soul, a spirit, a duty, a self-identity that refuses to negotiate. And to understand how powerful this force truly is, we need to look at the life of one young nobleman, a man who knew everything and did nothing, until Yamato Damashi found him. The man who knew everything and did nothing. Year 950, Heian period Japan. A quiet morning sun rises over the tiled roofs of Kyoto. Noble families prepare their sons for poetry, politics, and philosophy. But one young man has a different dream. His name was Tadayoshi, 24 years old, born into privilege, gifted with a brilliant mind, and cursed with a silent weakness he didn't yet understand. While other nobles spent their days in music halls and gardens, Tadayoshi devoured knowledge like a starving man devours food. Chinese classics, Buddhist sutras, the teachings of Confucius, war strategies, battle tactics, philosophy, discipline, meditation, formation manuals, everything. He studied so much that even older scholars whispered, "This boy knows more than men twice his age." And yet, he had never lifted a sword, not once. He dreamed of becoming a warrior, a general, a man capable of changing Japan's history. But his reality was much sadder. Every morning he woke with fire in his chest. Today I begin, today I train, today I transform. And every afternoon, that fire quietly died. A new book would call his name. A new scroll would promise a better technique. A new theory would convince him he wasn't ready yet. Tadayoshi wasn't lazy. He wasn't weak. He wasn't unmotivated. He was trapped in the same cage as millions of people today. The illusion that more knowledge means more progress. He knew exactly what to do, down to the smallest detail. He could teach others how to train, but he himself had never trained. The other nobles mocked him behind his back. Tadayoshi, the warrior of books. He can kill you with theory, but not with a sword. And the worst part, it was true. Knowledge stacked in his mind like stones. But stones don't walk. They don't move. They don't fight. They just sit, dead weight. One evening, everything broke. Tadayoshi's father, a stern military advisor, a man forged by real battles, looked at him and said, "You have the head of a general and the heart of a scribe. Knowledge without action is worthless. You are a ghost pretending to be alive." Those words pierced him deeper than any blade. Tadayoshi didn't sleep that night. For the first time, he saw himself clearly, a man overflowing with knowledge, but empty of spirit, a man who knew everything and did nothing. At dawn, something inside him shifted, not much, just a faint spark. But it was enough. He did not reach for a book that morning. He stepped outside. He walked into the forest. He left the world of theory behind and entered the world of action. He had no plan, no direction, only a desperate need to escape the prison of his own mind. He wandered until he heard something in the distance, a rhythmic cut, a disciplined breath, the sharp whistle of wood slicing air. And there, in a clearing, stood a man, old, scarred, silent, repeating the same sword movement over and over and over again. Not with emotion, not with passion, but with pure, relentless duty. This was the moment Tadayoshi's life changed, because, for the first time, he witnessed a man whose knowledge had a soul, a man whose body moved even when the mind might want to stop, a man who embodied Yamato Damashi. Tadayoshi didn't know it yet, but he was about to enter a brutal, transformative journey, a journey that would carve the spirit of action into his bones and turn dead knowledge into living power. And it all began with a single word he spoke to the old man. "Master, please teach me." The meeting in the forest, where knowledge is tested and found empty. The forest was silent. Cold morning air wrapped around the trees like a thin mist. Tadayoshi stood frozen at the edge of the clearing. In front of him, the old man continued his training. The same stance, the same cut, the same breath, repeating again and again with the precision of someone who has lived inside duty for decades. There was no excitement, no drama, no performance, just a body obeying a purpose. Tadayoshi watched with awe. His mind raced. This is what I want to become. When the old man finally stopped, sweat glistening on his scarred arms, Tadayoshi bowed deeply. "Master," he said, "please teach me." The old man barely looked at him. No, one word, sharp, cold, final. He turned to walk away. Tadayoshi panicked. "Wait, I've studied every scroll. I know Sun Tzu. I know the strategies of Chinese generals. I know formation theory, battle tactics, meditation." The old man stopped mid-step. Slowly, he turned back. His eyes were like stone. "You know techniques?" he said. "Good." He pointed to Tadayoshi's chest. "Use them yourself." And once again, he started walking away. Something inside Tadayoshi broke open. Shame, frustration, desperation. "Please," he shouted, "I need to change. I need to become more than I am." The man paused for a long, heavy moment. He looked at Tadayoshi again. This time, he didn't see arrogance. He didn't see pride. He saw a young man drowning in knowledge, starving for transformation. Not enough, but something. The old man exhaled. "Tomorrow," he said, "before sunrise. Here." Tadayoshi nodded so fast it looked like begging. "I'll be here, I promise." The old man's reply was brutal. "Promises?" He almost laughed. "Promises mean nothing. Everyone promises. Everyone begins. Everyone is motivated on day one." He stepped closer. "If you show up, I'll consider teaching you. If you don't ever come back." Then he disappeared into the trees, Tadayoshi's first battle. With himself that night, Tadayoshi didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the old man's voice echoed in his mind. Everyone is motivated on day one. And suddenly, Tadayoshi felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Not the fear of pain or failure, but the fear of being exposed. He had spent years building an identity around knowledge, but tomorrow, knowledge would not matter. Only his spirit, only his ability to act, only his duty to show up. Before sunrise, the first test of action. Tadayoshi arrived at the clearing an hour before dawn. The cold cut straight through his clothes. His breath fogged the air. His heart pounded painfully, but he stayed. The first rays of sunlight crept through the trees, and the old man stepped out of the shadows. He didn't smile. He didn't praise him. "You came," he said, not as a compliment, as a simple observation. "I said I would," Tadayoshi replied proudly. The old man's eyes didn't change. "Words," he said. "Today, I will see if you have more than words." The first lesson, reality versus knowledge. The old man, whose name Tadayoshi soon learned was Kaio, placed a wooden sword in Tadayoshi's hands. "Stand," he said, "knees bent, back straight, arms forward. This is the foundation of everything." "For how long?" Tadayoshi asked. Kaio walked past him, sat on a rock, and replied, "Until I tell you to stop." The first minute was easy. 2 minutes later, Tadayoshi's legs trembled. 5 minutes. and he was sweating. 10 minutes, and his muscles felt like fire. At 15 minutes, he was near tears. "Master," he gasped, I don't—" "Silence," Kaio said. "Your mind is lying to you. Keep going." But Tadayoshi could not. He collapsed forward, shaking, gasping for breath. Kaio stood up, looking down at him with calm disappointment. 15 minutes, he said. "And you want to be a warrior?" Tadayoshi lowered his head, humiliated. Kaio's voice was cold as steel. "You think battles last 15 minutes? You think enemies wait for you to get comfortable?" He turned away. "Go home. You don't have what it takes." The first spark of spirit. Something in Tadayoshi refused to accept that. "No," he said through gritted teeth. "I'll do it again." Kaio looked back slowly. "You think motivation will save you?" he asked. "This anger you feel right now, it will pass. Tomorrow, you'll wake up and you won't want to return." "I'll be back," Tadayoshi said. "Why?" Kaio asked. Tadayoshi opened his mouth and realized he had no answer. He wanted to be a warrior? That was just a feeling. He was ashamed of feeling he was motivated, a feeling, and feelings pass. Kaio shook his head. "You don't know why, and because you don't know, you will not last." He began walking away again. "Wait," Tadayoshi cried. "Tell me then, why should I return?" Kaio stopped, turned, and delivered the sentence that would reshape Tadayoshi's entire life. "Because it is your duty." "Duty to whom?" Tadayoshi asked, confused. "To yourself," Kaio said. "To the man you promised to become. Motivation is a feeling. Duty is an order. Feelings change with the wind. Duty remains, even in the storm." And with that, Tadayoshi began his true journey. The journey where knowledge meets the soul and becomes something alive. The first real lesson: pain, duty, and the spirit that moves the body. The next morning, before the sky even began to turn blue, Tadayoshi returned to the forest. Not excited, not motivated, not passionate. He returned because of one thing: duty. Not duty to Kaio, not duty to his father, not duty to society. Duty to the man he promised himself he would become. Every step toward the clearing was heavy. His legs ached from the day before. His mind kept whispering, "Turn back. You're tired. You proved enough. Just rest today." But he kept going, not because he felt strong, but because he refused to be the man who quits when he doesn't feel strong. When he arrived, Kaio was already there. This time, Kaio's face changed just a little. Not approval, but recognition. "You're back," he said. "I said I would be," Tadayoshi replied. Kaio's voice was colder than the morning wind. "Yesterday, you said it with emotion. Today, you say it with weariness." He stepped closer. "Today's words are truer." The stance returns. Kaio ordered him into the same position as yesterday, knees bent, back straight, arms extended. "This," Kaio said, "is the foundation of every warrior. If your foundation collapses, your entire spirit collapses." Tadayoshi lowered himself into position. His legs screamed instantly. His arms trembled from the start. Yesterday's weakness had multiplied overnight. Kaio watched without emotion. This time, however, he spoke. "Yesterday you relied on motivation," he said. "Today, you rely on duty." Tadayoshi clenched his teeth as pain spread through his thighs. "This is Yamato Damashi," Kaio continued. "It's not something you feel, it's something you do, until the doing becomes who you are." Minutes passed, like hours. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Tadayoshi's entire body shook violently. The cold air stung his lungs. His vision blurred. Every part of him begged to stop. And inside his head, A storm started. Just rest. This is pointless. You're not built for this. Why suffer? Kaio stood up. Your mind is the enemy, he said. Pain is honest. Pain simply tells you the truth. I am here. But your mind lies. Tadayoshi fought harder. His muscles burned hotter. 20 minutes. Finally, his body collapsed again. But this time, Kaio did not look disappointed. He nodded once. Progress. Tadayoshi panted on the ground, confused. Kaio continued, You think you've gotten stronger? You haven't. Your body is weaker than it was yesterday. He knelt beside him. But your spirit has grown. He tapped Tatayoshi's chest. This is where Yamato Damashi lives, not in the muscles, not in the books, not in the mind. He tapped again, harder, in the soul that refuses to negotiate. Knowledge meets reality. Kaio sat back. Chinese classics taught you strategies, he said, techniques, theory, philosophy. He pointed to Tatayoshi's trembling legs. But no scroll teaches this. He pointed to Tatayoshi's chest. No book gives you this. He tapped his own forehead. Knowledge is the map. Yamato Damashi is the movement. Then Kaio said the line that defines the entire philosophy. You can know how to win every battle in the world. But if you cannot step onto the battlefield, your knowledge is worthless. And that was the first time Tadayoshi truly understood. He didn't lack information. He lacked a soul that could carry the information into action. The historian's truth centuries later, a Japanese historian studying samurai culture would explain this exact idea. During the Heian period, elite nobles drowned in Chinese knowledge, but starved in practical wisdom. They could discuss war, but not fight. Recite philosophy, but not apply it. Admire courage, but not act courageously. Tadayoshi belonged to that generation, a generation where the mind was full and the spirit was empty. But today, we belong to that generation too. We scroll, we watch, we save quotes, we consume wisdom, but without a soul that demands action, knowledge rots inside us. Dead information, useless brilliance. Tadayoshi's 20 minutes of suffering taught him more than 20 years of reading, because for the first time in his life, knowledge had collided with reality, and reality had won. The first seed of the soul. Kaio helped him stand. You lasted 5 minutes longer than yesterday, he said, not because your body improved, but because your identity shifted. Tadayoshi didn't fully understand. Kaio explained, Yesterday you acted as someone who wants to be a warrior. Today you acted as someone who is becoming one. He stepped closer. Wanting is a feeling. Becoming is a duty. Then he said, Hesitation is the real enemy, not pain, not weakness, not ignorance. He lifted Tadayoshi's chin. Pain is part of the path. Weakness is where you start. Ignorance is where you learn. He pointed to Tadayoshi's heart. But hesitation, that is the death of every dream. This was the first day Tadayoshi learned. Yamato Damashi is not the absence of pain. It is the refusal to obey it. Knowledge without soul was dying inside him, and something alive was beginning to emerge, something ancient, something powerful, something unstoppable. The lesson of the river, when pain breaks you and the soul awakens. The third morning came colder than the others. The forest was wrapped in mist. The wind carried a quiet chill that bit through Tadayoshi's bones. But he still returned. His body ached from the last 2 days. His legs felt like stone. Every step toward the clearing was a negotiation his mind tried to win. Not today. You need rest. You've suffered enough." But Tadayoshi didn't listen, not because he felt strong, but because he'd begun to understand a deeper truth. Strength isn't what moves you forward. Duty is. Kaio was waiting, silent as always, judging nothing, expecting everything. "Follow me," he said. No explanation, no warning, no comfort. Tadayoshi followed. They walked deeper into the forest until they reached a river. The water was freezing, a sharp slicing cold that made even the air hurt to breathe. Kaio pointed to a rock in the middle of the rushing water. "Go," he said. "Stand on that rock. Assume your stance. Stay until I tell you to leave." Tadayoshi hesitated. "For how long?" he whispered. Kaio's reply was unforgiving. "Until you understand." "Understand what?" Tadayoshi wanted to ask. But there are some lessons words cannot teach. So he stepped into the river. The moment the water touched his legs, he gasped. It felt like knives, like his skin was tearing, like the river was trying to pull the life out of him. Still, he pushed forward. He climbed onto the rock, slipping once, nearly falling but catching himself. He assumed the stance, and then the suffering began. The body fights back. 5 minutes passed. His legs went numb. His hands trembled. His teeth chattered so violently he feared they'd break. 10 minutes. His breath became a shivering staccato. His feet felt like blocks of ice. His body screamed a single command, "Get out!" 15 minutes. Fear settled in, not fear of pain, fear of drowning in discomfort so deep he might lose himself. "Master!" Tadayoshi shouted over the rushing water. "I can't do this." Kaio didn't move. "Your ancestors endured worse," he replied. "They marched with open wounds. They fought in snowstorms. They stood on battlefields for days." He stepped closer to the riverbank. "And you cannot handle cold water?" Tadayoshi squeezed his eyes shut. His legs shook uncontrollably. "Why?" he shouted. "Why must I suffer like this?" Kaio's voice thundered across the river. "Because it is your duty. Because you promised to become more than you are. Because comfort is the enemy that has killed every version of you until now." The words hit Tadayoshi like arrows. He wanted to quit. Every part of his body begged for escape. The water didn't care about his dreams or his knowledge. It didn't care about his books or his theories. The river cared about one thing. Will you stand or will you run? And then something happened. Something small, something ancient, something powerful. Tadayoshi stopped fighting the pain. He accepted it. He let the cold be cold. He let the discomfort be discomfort. He let the suffering simply exist without resisting it. And in that moment, the pain didn't vanish, but its power over him weakened because he had finally understood pain is not the enemy. Resistance to pain is the enemy. When spirit surpasses body time blurred, minutes stretched into eternities, hours disguise themselves as seconds. He no longer fought to endure, he simply endured. Eventually, Kaio raised his hand. "Enough," he said. Tadayoshi stumbled off the rock. He could barely move his legs. He collapsed onto the riverbank, trembling violently. Kaio helped him toward a fire he had prepared, as if he knew Tadayoshi would survive the river. When Tadayoshi's body finally stopped shaking, Kaio said, 45 minutes. Tadayoshi's eyes widened. It felt like hours. "Master, how? How did I stay that long?" Kaio poked the fire, sparks rising into the morning air. "Because you stopped fighting," he said. "You stopped resisting the cold. You accepted that discomfort was your duty." He turned to Tadayoshi. "This is Yamato Damashi. It is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to obey your purpose even while in pain. He placed a hand on Tatayoshi's shoulder. "You think warriors are fearless?" he asked. "They feel fear. They feel pain. They feel doubt." He leaned closer. "But they do not let feelings decide their actions." Then Kaio said something Tatayoshi would remember for the rest of his life. "When you stop negotiating with your suffering, suffering becomes powerless. When you stop resisting discomfort, discomfort becomes a teacher." That is Yamato Damashi, not strength of body, but strength of soul. The river didn't make Tatayoshi stronger. It revealed the strength that had been hidden under years of fear, theory, hesitation, and comfort. For the first time in his life, he felt something awaken within him, a flame, a spine, a spirit, a soul. The great temptation, when comfort returns for one last battle. A full week passed. 7 days of relentless training. 7 days of duty over desire. 7 days of building a spirit that could move the body even when the mind resisted. Tatayoshi wasn't strong yet. He wasn't fast. He wasn't skilled. But something inside him was changing. He woke earlier. He argued less with himself. He began to trust the part of him that acted and ignore the part that feared. And that's when the greatest enemy arrived. Not pain, not weakness, not doubt. Comfort. The night of the full moon. On the 8th night, the nobles hosted the full moon festival. Lanterns everywhere, wine flowing, music, poetry, beautiful women, noble sons laughing without worry, a world of ease and softness calling his name. For the first time in many days, Tatayoshi felt desire again. One night won't hurt. I've trained all week. I deserve to relax. I'll double my training tomorrow. But the mind is a master negotiator, and comfort is a patient hunter. That night, Tatayoshi went to the festival. He laughed, he drank, he enjoyed the warmth of attention. For a moment, he forgot the forest, he forgot the pain, he forgot the duty, he forgot himself. By the time he stumbled home, the moon was fading into dawn, and Tatayoshi broke his first promise to himself. He didn't wake up before sunrise. He didn't go to the clearing. He slept. And when he finally opened his eyes, guilt hit him like a blade to the heart. Not guilt from Kaio, not guilt from others, guilt from the man he had begun to become and had just abandoned. Judgment Day. The next morning, he ran to the clearing, heart pounding, hoping Kaio would be absent. But Kaio was there, waiting, still, silent. There was no anger in Kaio's expression, no shouting, no punishment waiting. Instead, Kaio looked at him with something far worse, sadness. "You didn't come," Kaio said. Tatayoshi's voice broke. It was the festival. Kaio raised a hand. "I don't need your explanation. You don't owe me anything." He stepped closer. "You owe yourself." Tatayoshi felt tears rising. "Please," he begged, "give me another chance. It was a mistake." Kaio's voice was cold, but not cruel. "It was not a mistake," he said. "It was a choice. You chose pleasure over purpose, comfort over duty, yesterday over tomorrow." Tatayoshi fell to his knees. "I'm sorry. Please, let me continue." Kaio turned his back. "You still don't understand Yamato Damashi," he said. "You think it is something you do when you feel strong." He walked a few steps away. "Yesterday, you let your comfort win. Today, you must face the consequence." The identity test. Without turning around, Kaio spoke. "Stand." Tatayoshi obeyed instantly. "Assume the stance." He did. "Hold it for 2 hours." Tatayoshi's heart stopped. Master, 2 hours?" Kaio's voice did not soften. "This is the price of yesterday. When you break duty, The consequences do not disappear. They wait. And then Tadayoshi understood. Comfort doesn't come free. Comfort always sends the bill later, and the bill is always heavier. 2 hours of excruciating pain began. Minutes dragged like centuries. Tadayoshi cried. He shook. He almost collapsed 100 times. But for the first time in his life, he didn't quit. Not because he was strong, not because he felt powerful, but because he was ashamed of betraying himself. Because he finally realized something Kaio had been waiting for him to understand. You don't fall because you are weak. You fall because the old identity inside you is still alive. Kaio watched him tremble, gasping, barely hanging on. When Tadayoshi finally collapsed after 2 hours, Kaio knelt beside him. You needed this, he said, not to punish you, but to teach you. He placed a firm hand on Tadayoshi's shoulder. Yesterday, you chose pleasure. Today, you paid the price. He looked into Tadayoshi's broken eyes. This is the moment every warrior faces, the moment where he realizes discipline is not about action, but about identity. Tadayoshi blinked through tears. Kaio continued. Tell me, he said, what is Yamato Damashi? Tadayoshi struggled to speak. It's doing it even when you don't want to. Kaio shook his head. Partially correct. Go deeper. Tadayoshi tried again. It's duty over feeling. Kaio stepped closer. That is a result, not the essence. Tadayoshi closed his eyes, remembering the stance, the river, the pain, the shame of yesterday, the duty of today. And suddenly, he understood. His voice was trembling when he spoke. Yamato Damashi is identity. It's not what I do. It's who I declare myself to be. When I break it, I don't break a habit. I betray myself. Kaio's expression finally changed. Recognition, respect, the acknowledgement of a turning point. Now, Kaio said, you are beginning to understand. The death of the old self, Tadayoshi, had faced the most dangerous enemy so far, not the cold, not the pain, the version of himself that pretended, that negotiated, that promised, that wanted, but never acted. And for the first time, he didn't run from the consequences. He accepted them, he faced them, he paid them, and in doing so, the old Tadayoshi, the Tadayoshi of books, the Tadayoshi of promises, the Tadayoshi of comfort, took his first step toward death. A new identity was being born, not through motivation, not through inspiration, but through suffering, through failure, through rising again after betrayal, through understanding, I am not someone who wants to be a warrior. I am someone who is becoming a warrior. This is how Yamato Damashi begins, not in victory, but in honest defeat, followed by one unshakable choice: return, identity, not action, the core truth that changes everything. The next morning, Tadayoshi returned to the clearing, not with excitement, not with fear, but with something new: clarity. He didn't fully understand it yet, but something inside him had shifted the day before. Suffering had stripped away the noise. Failure had exposed the truth. Consequences had forced him to confront himself. Kaio was waiting, seated on the same rock as always. But today, he didn't begin with physical training. Instead, he gestured for Tadayoshi to sit. We will not train the body today, Kaio said calmly. We will train the source of everything. Tadayoshi frowned. The spirit? He asked. Kaio shook his head. No, identity. He drew a line in the dirt with a long, steady stroke. There are two ways a man approaches discipline, Kaio began. One, through desire. He tapped the dirt. I want to be stronger. I want to learn. I want to improve. This man hopes he wishes, he negotiates. He drew another line. The second, through identity. He tapped again. I am a warrior. I am someone who trains. I am someone who acts. This man does not negotiate. He simply lives as who he is. He looked Tadayoshi square in the eyes. You have lived your life as the first man. Tadayoshi swallowed. Kaio continued. You said, I want to be a warrior. But that sentence contains distance. It separates you from who you want to become. He leaned forward, and anything with distance invites negotiation. Tadayoshi felt something tighten in his chest. Kaio pressed on. When you say, I want to train, your mind always has room to resist, room to argue, room to postpone. He tapped Tatayoshi's heart. But when you say, I am someone who trains, the question, should I, dies. He paused, letting the silence sink in. Warriors do not wake each morning deciding whether to train. The question does not exist. They train because it is who they are. Tatayoshi's eyes widened as the truth clicked inside him. Kaio smiled, a rare, quiet smile. You see, discipline is not about forcing action. It is about transforming identity so deeply that action becomes a natural expression of who you are. He stood up, hands behind his back. That is Yamato Damashi, not the spirit of effort, but the spirit of inevitability. He stepped closer to Tadayoshi. You must stop saying, I want to be a warrior. You must say, I am a warrior learning to reveal himself. The words struck deep. Kaio continued, action follows identity, always. If your identity is weak, your actions will be weak. If your identity is unclear, your actions will be inconsistent. If your identity is borrowed, your actions will collapse under pressure. He placed a hand on Tatayoshi's shoulder. But when your identity is forged, when you decide who you are and you live that decision every day without negotiation. He pointed toward the forest as if pointing toward the future. Nothing in this world can stop you. Tadayoshi felt something inside him settle, not excitement, not determination, but acceptance. Acceptance of a truth he had run from his entire life. I am not becoming a warrior. I am already one. The world just hasn't seen it yet. Kaio nodded, as if reading his thoughts. Good, he said. Now, your training begins. Not the training of the body, but the training of identity. The 90-day transformation begins. Kaio gave Tadayoshi one principle, a principle that would change his life forever. Decide once, act 1,000 times. No more daily decisions, no more mental debates, no more asking himself, should I train today? The decision was made, identity was chosen. He was a warrior. Warriors train. Warriors rise before dawn. Warriors show up even when they are sick. Warriors endure discomfort without explanation. Warriors act not because they feel like it, but because they can't avoid being who they are. From that day forward, Tatayoshi's mind became quiet. Every morning felt the same, not easy, but clear. No questions, no internal war, just duty, just identity, just Yamato Damashi, the soul that moves the body without hesitation. And this was the beginning of Tatayoshi's rebirth, the birth of a man who no longer knew a lot, but a man who became a lot, a man whose knowledge finally had a soul. The transformation, decide once, act 1,000 times. From that day onward, something fundamental changed in Tadayoshi. The decision was made. His identity was chosen. The internal debates were over. He no longer woke up asking, should I train today? That question died the moment he embraced Yamato Damashi. Warriors don't negotiate with their duties. Warriors don't wait to feel ready. Warriors don't argue with their own purpose. Warriors train. And Tadayoshi, for the first time in his life, was becoming one. The first 10 days, the death of negotiation. The mornings were brutal. His alarm would ring long before dawn, and his body would scream for sleep. The old voice whispered, "Skip today. You trained yesterday. You've done enough. You deserve rest." But Tadayoshi didn't answer the voice. He simply stood up. Because he wasn't trying to be someone anymore. He was someone. And that identity moved before his thoughts did. He arrived at the clearing every single day, bleeding, shaking, limiting himself, pushing himself. Kaio watched quietly, recognizing the shift. "You see?" Kaio said on the 10th day. "You no longer battle your mind. Your mind has accepted who you are becoming." He tapped Tatayoshi's chest. "This is what happens when a man kills negotiation. A quiet strength grows inside him." The middle weeks, when action becomes natural. By week 6, something strange began to happen. Tadayoshi would wake up before the alarm. His body rose without thought. His feet carried him toward the forest without hesitation. Training no longer required force. It didn't require motivation. It didn't require excitement. It simply happened. Kaio noticed it instantly. "You are not training anymore," Kaio said. "You are being." He continued, "When identity is true, discipline becomes reflex." Those words hit Tadayoshi deeply because he could feel it. His movements were cleaner, his stance was steadier, his breathing calmer. The fear in his muscles disappeared. The hesitation in his chest evaporated. He wasn't fighting to endure the training, he was flowing through it. Action was becoming a natural expression of who he was. Day 63, the test of identity. But the greatest test of transformation came unexpectedly. On the 63rd day, Tadayoshi woke up sick. Fever, head pounding, body shaking, vision blurry, breath heavy. Even standing was difficult. The old self whispered, "Today you must rest. You'll train tomorrow. It's okay to skip just one day." But before the thought finished, Tadayoshi was already putting on his clothes. He staggered through the forest, each step feeling heavier than the last. When he arrived at the clearing, Kaio saw instantly that he was sick. "Your body is unwell," Kaio said. "Why did you come?" Tadayoshi answered without thinking, without hesitation, with a clarity he had never felt before, "Because this is who I am." Kaio stared at him with a shock of pride, a pride he had never shown before, not a small smile, not subtle approval, a full, deep, genuine smile of respect. "You finally understand," Kaio said. "Yamato Damashi is not about being strong, it's about being unshakable." He helped Tadayoshi sit down. "Go home," Kaio said softly. "Rest today, not because you are avoiding work, but because warriors rest to fight better tomorrow." He placed a hand on Tadayoshi's shoulder. "But you already passed the test." The moment of rebirth, as Tadayoshi walked home, something dawned on him. He did not feel guilty for resting. Why? Because it wasn't a failure, it wasn't avoidance, it wasn't negotiation, it was strategy. He finally understood a truth most people never learn. Weak people rest to escape the battle. Warriors rest to return stronger. He was not skipping training, he was preparing for the next day of battle. For the first time in his entire life, Tadayoshi realized he was no longer the same man. He was not a scholar pretending to be a warrior. He was not a noble boy hiding behind books. He was not the ghost his father accused him of being. He was a warrior, not because of skill, not because of strength, not because of mastery, but because of identity. A warrior is not born from victory. A warrior is born from the decision to never turn away. The man of knowledge had died, and the man of soul was rising. Action was no longer a choice, it was a destiny. By day 90, Tatayoshi's transformation was undeniable. His muscles were harder, his stance firm, his spirit calm, his presence different. But the true change was invisible. He no longer needed motivation. He no longer needed reminders. He no longer needed permission. He didn't try to act. He didn't push himself to act. He acted because it was impossible not to. That is Yamato Damashi. Not discipline, not motivation, not habit. A soul anchored so deeply that the body cannot betray it. The final lesson, death and rebirth, the true purpose of Yamato Damashi. 90 days had passed. 90 days of freezing rivers, aching muscles, early mornings, broken limits, silenced excuses, and a spirit sharpened through suffering. Tatayoshi stood in the clearing one morning, watching the sunrise filter through the branches. He no longer felt like a visitor in this place. He felt like he belonged here. His body had transformed, yes, stronger, harder, cleaner in movement. But the real transformation was deeper. He was not the same man who stepped into this forest 3 months ago, not even close. Kaio sensed it. Today, the old master approached him differently, not like a student, but like an equal who had discovered a truth most men never touch. "You've completed your ango," Kaio said, referring to the ancient term for an intensive period of training. "But before you leave, you must learn the one truth this entire journey has been building toward." Tatayoshi straightened, his heart steady. Kaio looked at him with calm, ancient eyes. "Tatayoshi," he said softly, "Yamato Damashi was never about training." Tatayoshi froze. Kaio continued, "It was never about strength, not about endurance, not about posture, not about technique." He stepped closer. "It was about death." Tatayoshi's breath caught. Kaio spoke slowly, clearly, each word landing with weight. The Tatayoshi who arrived here 90 days ago had to die. He pointed to the forest path where Tatayoshi had first entered. That man knew everything and did nothing. That man lived in his head instead of in the world. That man bowed to comfort instead of purpose. He tapped Tatayoshi's chest. That man was clever, but soulless. Tatayoshi swallowed hard. Kaio continued, "Every day that you woke before dawn, you were killing him. Every time you stood in that stance, shaking in pain, you were killing him. Every time you faced the river, you were killing him. Every time you acted without motivation, you were killing him." Kaio placed a firm hand on Tatayoshi's shoulder, "And every time you chose duty over comfort, you were being born again." Tatayoshi felt something rise in his chest, a mixture of grief and pride, mourning and awakening. Kaio's voice softened. "You see, the books you read weren't wrong. Knowledge is valuable. Knowledge gives direction. Knowledge reveals the map." He tapped Tatayoshi's forehead. "But knowledge without a soul is a corpse." He tapped Tatayoshi's heart. "Yamato Damashi is the soul, the fire, the spark, the animating force that takes everything you know and pulls it into reality." Kaio stepped back and looked at him proudly. "You have something now that many men live their entire lives without discovering." Tatayoshi waited. Kaio spoke the truth. "You have a soul that obeys purpose, not emotion. A spirit that is stronger than your feelings. An identity that no longer negotiates with weakness." Kaio exhaled. "And that, Tatayoshi, is what makes a warrior. Not strength, Not talent, not skill, not brilliance, identity, duty, spirit, Yamato Damashi, the handing over of purpose. Kaio led Tadayoshi to an open field. Waiting there were 20 men, soldiers, armored, disciplined, ready for guidance. These men, Kaio said, are from a nearby clan. They need an instructor, someone who understands strategy. But more importantly, he stared deeply into Tatayoshi's eyes. Someone who has Yamato Damashi. Tatayoshi's breath caught. "You are recommending me?" he asked, shocked. Kaio shook his head slowly. "No." He walked behind Tadayoshi. "I am handing you your duty." Tadayoshi felt his knees grow weak. He had never taught anyone, never led anyone, never commanded soldiers. "I don't know if I'm ready," he whispered. Kaio smiled, not with amusement, but with the pride of a father who finally sees his son stand tall. "No one is ready," Kaio said, "but warriors do not wait to feel ready. Warriors become ready through action." He placed a hand on Tatayoshi's back. "You know this now." Tadayoshi exhaled, trembling with fear, but more importantly, with purpose. Kaio stepped aside. "Go," he said. "Teach them not what you know, but who you have become." Tadayoshi walked forward as the soldiers straightened with respect. And in that moment, as the sun rose behind him, as Kaio watched silently with pride, the old Tadayoshi, the scholar without a soul, was gone forever. In his place stood a man whose knowledge finally had spirit, a man whose identity led his actions, a man reborn through purpose, a man alive, a man of Yamato Damashi. The true meaning, knowledge plus spirit equals power. Before Tadayoshi stepped forward to lead the 20 men waiting for him, Kaio placed a hand on his arm. "There is something you must understand," he said quietly, "something few people ever learn, even today." Kaio led him a few steps away to a quiet corner of the clearing where the river's distant sound carried gently through the air. "Do you know," Kaio began, "why I taught you Yamato Damashi?" Tadayoshi shook his head. Kaio continued, his voice calm, ancient, steady. "Because you were exactly the kind of man this concept was created to save." Tadayoshi frowned, confused. Kaio went on. "Hundreds of years ago, the elite of Japan studied endlessly. Chinese classics, Buddhist sutras, Confucian philosophy, war manuals, poetry." He sighed. "They admired knowledge more than action." Tadayoshi lowered his gaze, recognizing himself in that description. Kaio continued, "They debated war, but never fought. They knew thousands of spiritual lessons, but could not control their own hearts. They memorized the strategies of emperors, but could not make decisions under pressure." Kaio looked at Tadayoshi sharply. They had Karazukai, Chinese knowledge, but they did not have Yamato Damashi, the spirit that makes a man use what he knows. He pointed to Tadayoshi's forehead. "Knowledge without spirit remains trapped in the mind." He tapped Tadayoshi's heart. "But knowledge with spirit moves into the world." Tadayoshi felt his chest tighten. He finally understood how deeply this applied to his own life. Kaio continued, "Yamato Damashi was never about rejecting China. It was never about nationalism, never about superiority, never about war." He stepped closer. "It was about recognizing one simple truth. Information alone cannot transform a man. Only identity can." Kaio paced slowly as he spoke. "Knowledge shows you the way, but Yamato Damashi makes you walk. Knowledge gives you the strategy, but Yamato Damashi gives you the courage. Knowledge teaches you philosophy, but Yamato Damashi gives you purpose." He gestured toward the soldiers waiting in the field. Those men needs someone who can bridge the worlds of mind and body, someone who understands strategy and action, intellect and courage, knowledge and soul. He looked directly at Tadayoshi. That is the man you have become. The historian's truth. Centuries after Tadayoshi lived and died, a Japanese historian specializing in the Heian period studied this concept deeply. He summarized it like this: Yamato Damashi was not anti-intellectual, it was anti-inaction. He explained that the elites had absorbed so much foreign knowledge that they began confusing understanding with mastery. They mistook talk for ability and theory for transformation. He wrote, "The purpose of Yamato Damashi was simple, to bring the body and soul into alignment with the knowledge the mind possessed. In other words, to make knowledge come alive." Kaio echoed this truth centuries before it was written. "You can memorize every scroll in Asia," he said, "but until your spirit rises, your knowledge is a corpse." He placed a hand on Tadayoshi's shoulder. That is the true meaning of Yamato Damashi, not the strength of a nation, but the strength of a man to use what he knows. The fusion of mind and spirit Tadayoshi finally understood. All his life, he thought he lacked information, so he devoured more. All his life, he thought transformation came from knowledge, so he studied harder. All his life, he believed insight would replace action, so he read endlessly. But the truth was simple. He didn't need more knowledge. He needed a soul that demanded action. He needed Yamato Damashi, the spirit that transforms "I know" into "I do," "I want to be" into "I am," thoughts into embodiment, dreams into reality. Kaio stepped back and gestured toward the soldiers again. "Now go," he said, "and teach them this truth, not through words, but through the man you have become." And Tadayoshi walked forward with the quiet strength of a man whose knowledge finally had a soul. 5 years later, the legacy of a reborn identity. 5 years passed. 5 years since Tadayoshi first stepped into the forest as a scholar drowning in knowledge, starving in action. 5 years since he faced the river, the stance, the suffering, and the death of his old identity. 5 years since Kaio placed 20 men under his guidance. Now, at age 29, Tadayoshi was no longer a student. He was a general, not the kind appointed through noble birth, but the kind shaped through fire. He commanded 300 soldiers, men who followed him not because of rank, but because of who he had become. The transformation was undeniable. He was calm when others panicked, steady when others trembled, decisive when others hesitated, relentless when others surrendered. His soldiers had seen him train at dawn while frost still covered the ground. They had watched him endure pain with the stillness of a mountain. They had witnessed him keep his word even when circumstances turned cruel. And they had adopted his spirit. The army that would not break in battle, his men weren't the strongest. They weren't the fastest. They didn't have the finest steel or armor, but they had something rare, something more powerful than weapons, something that terrified enemy generals. They did not negotiate. When the order was given, they acted. Not later, not after hesitation, not after fear, immediately, because their identity was clear. We are Tadayoshi's soldiers, and Tadayoshi's soldiers do not break. For the first time in centuries, an entire unit fought with the unshakable spirit that ancient Japanese once dreamed of. The fusion of knowledge and soul, mind and duty, identity and action. The true Yamato Damashi. A young recruit arrives. One day, after training, a young recruit approached Tadayoshi. He was trembling, not out of fear of Tadayoshi, but out of fear of his own limitations. "General," the young man said, "I've read all the manuals. I know every formation, every technique, every strategy. But when I'm in training, I freeze." He looked down in shame. "I know what to do, but I can't do it." Tadayoshi smiled softly, a knowing smile, because this young recruit was exactly who he had been 5 years earlier. A man full of information, but empty of spirit. A man trapped in knowledge, but untouched by action. Tadayoshi placed a hand on his shoulder. "You freeze," he said. "For the same reason I froze." The young recruit looked up, surprised. "You?" he whispered. "You froze?" Tadayoshi nodded slowly. "Yes, because I had knowledge without a soul." The recruit frowned, confused. Tadayoshi continued, "You have filled your mind with theory, but your identity has not been forged. Knowledge tells you what to do. Spirit makes you do it." The young man swallowed. Can I learn that?" Tatayoshi's answer came without hesitation. "Yes, come tomorrow before sunrise. I will teach you what no scroll can teach." As the young recruit bowed, Tadayoshi felt a quiet echo of the past. 5 years ago, he had stood in this exact clearing, begging a scarred old man to teach him. Now, he was the one others begged to learn from. The cycle of Yamato Damashi had begun again. The ripple effect of one transformed man. Tadayoshi learned something profound that day. A man who changes himself changes his family. A man who changes his identity changes his destiny. A man who gives his knowledge a soul changes everyone who meets him. This was the legacy Kaio had prepared him for, not strength, not victory, not reputation. A living example of what a human being becomes when he stops negotiating and starts embodying. The spirit of Yamato Damashi was no longer just inside Tadayoshi. It now lived inside every soldier he led, every recruit he trained, every person who saw him act without hesitation. This was the true power of identity. It spreads, it inspires, it transforms entire communities. And it all began because one man in a forest decided to kill his excuses, rebuild himself through duty, and become the kind of person who simply cannot help but act. Distortion and return. How a beautiful idea was twisted and how its true meaning survived. Tadayoshi lived a long life. He led men with courage. He taught hundreds of young warriors. He raised families, mentored leaders, and became known as the general who fought not with brutality, but with purpose. He died at the age of 67. By then, Yamato Damashi, the true Yamato Damashi, was alive in his soldiers and in every man he trained. But like many great ideas in history, it did not stay pure forever. Centuries passed. Japan changed. Governments rose and fell, and somewhere along the way, a beautiful concept was stolen. The corruption of a sacred idea. In the years leading to World War II, Japan's military government needed to build obedient soldiers and unquestioning citizens. So they searched for concepts that could be twisted into propaganda. They found Yamato Damashi, but they did not use it as Tadayoshi lived it. They did not use it as Kaio taught it. They did not use it as the Heian elites intended. They distorted it. The government declared Yamato Damashi means dying for the emperor. They claimed it means nationalism, it means superiority, it means loyalty to the state above all else. They told men, your spirit must belong to Japan. Your duty is to die. Your identity is to submit. Your purpose is to fight without question. This was not Yamato Damashi. This was manipulation. A sacred concept of inner mastery, twisted into a tool of control. A philosophy born from the fight against inaction and internal weakness was transformed into a justification for war, obedience, and blind sacrifice. The world saw this perversion and associated the term with nationalism. But that was never what Kaio taught. It was never what Tadayoshi lived. It was never what the Heian era intended, the return to the original meaning. Today, many Japanese scholars avoid the term Yamato Damashi because of the scars it carries from wartime misuse, but the original meaning, the meaning Kaio taught, still survives. It was never about nationalism, never about superiority, never about empire, never about dying for authority. It was about something far deeper, becoming a person whose identity commands action, becoming someone who does not negotiate with weakness, becoming someone who brings knowledge into the world through duty, becoming the version of yourself you promised to be. That was its heart. Not war, not death, not politics. Transformation, personal, internal, unbreakable. The spirit that kept Tadayoshi on the rock in the freezing river was not the spirit of nationalism. It was the spirit of a man refusing to betray himself. The force that brought him to the clearing every morning was not loyalty to a flag. It was loyalty to his identity. And the soldiers he trained did not fight because they believed their nation was superior. They fought because they believed they had become men of purpose, men of identity, men of Yamato Damashi. A concept reborn. And now, centuries later, the concept is returning to its real form, not as a nationalistic slogan, not as a tool of the state, but as the ancient truth it always was. The soul that brings your knowledge to life, the spirit that makes action inevitable, the identity that keeps you steady in the storm. This is the version we are reclaiming today, the version Kaio meant, the version Tadayoshi lived, the version that survived not through governments, but through men who refused to negotiate with themselves. Yamato Damashi lives every time someone chooses purpose over comfort, every time someone acts when they don't feel like it, every time someone decides who they are and lives that decision without compromise. It lives in you the moment you stop consuming knowledge and start embodying it. And that is the version we bring forward into the modern world. Applying Yamato Damashi today. For a moment, let's leave ancient Japan. Let's leave the forest, the stance training, the river, the battles, the soldiers, the armor. And let's return to your life right now, 21st century. Your room, your goals, your dreams, your struggles, your excuses, your unfinished plans. What does Yamato Damashi, this ancient idea of knowledge with a soul, have to do with you? Everything, because every day of your life you face the same battle Tadayoshi faced, the battle between knowledge versus action, desire versus duty, comfort versus purpose, old self versus new identity. And if you're honest, you already know what you want to become. You already know what steps to take. You already know the actions required. The problem isn't knowing, it's doing. So now, let's translate Yamato Damashi into a practical guide you can use starting today. 1. Identity before action. Stop saying, I need to start going to the gym. I should read more. I want to start a business. I want to fix my life. These sentences set you up to fail because they create distance between you and the person you want to be. Instead, declare identity. I am someone who trains. I am someone who reads daily. I am someone who builds. I am someone who follows through. When identity is solid, action becomes inevitable. Duty over emotion. You won't feel motivated every day, You won't always feel strong. You won't always feel ready. Feelings are unstable. Duty is stable. Make your actions a duty, not a mood. A warrior doesn't wake up asking, "Do I feel like training today?" That question does not exist. Why? Because warriors train. It's identity. You don't walk because you feel like walking. You walk because you're human. Make your actions as natural as your existence. Pain is not the enemy. Pain means your identity is growing. The discomfort you feel when you wake early, when you show up tired, when you repeat hard tasks, when you push yourself, that discomfort is not a warning. It is a signal that the old version of you is dying. Pain is the battlefield where identity is forged. 4. Eliminate negotiation. Nothing destroys a man faster than the quiet sentence, "Maybe I'll do it later." Later becomes tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes, "I used to have dreams." Yamato Damashi teaches, kill negotiation at the root. If you decide to do something, the decision is final. There is no debate, no renegotiation, no excuses. Decide once, act 1,000 times. Make one decision about who you are and live it every day. 5. Use knowledge. Immediately. Books, videos, courses, they give you information. But information without use is dead. Apply everything you learn. Read a chapter, execute something from it, watch a tutorial, try it immediately, learn a lesson, change one behavior that same day. Knowledge becomes wisdom only when it enters your actions. 6. Protect the identity. You declare your old self will attack you. Comfort will tempt you. Distractions will call your name. That's normal. But Yamato Damashi says, you must defend the identity you choose. Every time you follow through, your new identity strengthens. Every time you skip, your old identity strengthens. This is war, and the enemy is not the world. The enemy is the version of you that prefers comfort over purpose. 7. Consistency. Over intensity. People fail not because their goals are too big, but because they try to do them all in one day. Study for 3 hours every day beats studying for 15 hours once a week. Walk every morning beats going to the gym once a month. Small actions performed daily create transformation, because transformation is not an event. It's a rhythm, a pulse, a heartbeat, a ritual. Like Tatayoshi's mornings. 8. Feelings are allowed, but they are not in charge. Yamato Damashi never said don't feel. It said don't let feelings command the ship. Fear can speak, exhaustion can whisper, doubt can visit. But duty gives the orders. Identity moves the body. Feelings are passengers. Purpose is the captain. 9. Rest strategically, not emotionally. Kaio taught Tatayoshi a final truth. Rest is not weakness if it serves purpose. There is a difference between I'm avoiding hard work and I'm recharging to return stronger. One is cowardice, one is strategy. Always ask, why am I stopping? If the answer is comfort, laziness, avoidance, push through. If the answer is recovery, strategy, long-term endurance, rest with discipline. Warriors rest to fight harder. Cowards rest to escape the fight. 10. The modern definition of Yamato Damashi. It is not about Japan, not about cultural pride, not about nationalism. It is about you, your soul, your identity, your unshakable purpose. Yamato Damashi means I act because this is who I am. I follow through even without motivation. I embody my knowledge through action. I execute when others hesitate. It is the spirit that turns dreams into reality. It is the bridge between who you are and who you are destined to become. It is the death of the old self and the rebirth of the real one. The final secret and closing challenge. On the final day of Tatayoshi's 90-day training, Kaio did something unexpected. He called Tatayoshi to sit beside him. No stance, no sword, no orders, just silence. The river moved gently in the background, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Kaio looked at Tatayoshi with calm, wise eyes. "You have learned Yamato Damashi," he said. "You have killed your old self. You have built identity. You have fused knowledge and action." Tatayoshi bowed his head respectfully. "But," Kaio continued, "there is one final lesson, one that most men misunderstand, one that completes the journey." Tatayoshi's eyes lifted. Kaio spoke slowly, softly, but with the weight of truth behind every word. "Now that you have mastered Yamato Damashi, I will teach you when to break it." Tatayoshi froze. Break it? The concept that saved him? The spirit that rebuilt him? Kaio continued. "Duty without wisdom becomes fanaticism. Identity without balance becomes ego. Discipline without strategy becomes self-destruction." He looked toward the river. "Yamato Damashi is not about punishing yourself. It is not about breaking your body. It is not about doing everything every day without rest." He turned back to Tatayoshi. "It is about serving your purpose, not your ego." Tatayoshi listened closely. When a man stops because something is hard, he is avoiding. But when a man stops because he must recover to perform better tomorrow, he is strategizing. Kaio tapped Tatayoshi's chest. "The difference is intention." Then he taught the final secret. If you stop out of weakness, act anyway. If you stop out of wisdom, rest with purpose. He stood and faced Tatayoshi. Ask yourself each day, why am I stopping? If the answer is fear, laziness, boredom, or comfort, kill the thought and execute. But if the answer is, I must recover so I can fight tomorrow, then rest knowing your duty continues. Tatayoshi finally understood. Warriors don't rest to escape the battle. Warriors rest to continue the battle. The last dawn, in the clearing, Kaio turned to leave, his footsteps slow, his presence heavy with pride. "Tatayoshi," he said without looking back, "the man you were 90 days ago is dead." He paused. "And the man you have become will save others." Tatayoshi bowed deeply. As he rose, Kaio spoke the final words of their 3-month journey. "Remember this, you do not act because you want to. You act because this is who you are. Yamato Damashi is not about doing. It is about being." And then Kaio walked away, leaving Tatayoshi with a new identity, a new spirit, and a new destiny. Now, the challenge comes to you. The story ends here, but the message does not. The question now is not, what did Tatayoshi learn? The question is, what will you do with this? Right now, you are standing where Tatayoshi once stood, between who you are and who you want to be. You already have knowledge. You already know what needs to be done. You already know the path. The only thing missing is the soul that moves the body. So ask yourself, what have you been postponing, even though you know exactly what to do? What habits have you been trying to start tomorrow for months or years? What version of yourself have you been avoiding because it demands more from you? What identity are you ready to kill? Because here's the truth. Knowledge is dead without action. Action is weak without identity. Identity is nothing without duty. You have to choose. Today, not tomorrow. Not after you feel inspired, not after you watch another video. Today. Because the longer you wait, the stronger your old identity becomes. And one day, it will win, unless you defeat him now. So here's your challenge, the same challenge Kaio gave Tatayoshi. Decide who you are, declare it, live it every day without negotiation. Not because you feel like it, because it is who you are. This is Yamato Damashi, not a Japanese concept, a human truth, the bridge between who you are and who you are destined to become. Now go, take action, be present, walk with honor, follow the path, and I'll see you in the next video